In this video, I'm going to do a ranking of all the albums by ACDC. My original intention was to do an anniversary review of Blow Up Your Video from 1988, which is celebrating 35 years. But then I thought to myself, my last ACDC ranking was about 2 years ago, right after the new album Power Up came out. So it's time for an update. With that being said, this will be the international releases, starting with the High Voltage from 1976. So I will not be including the two Australian-only albums, nor live albums, EPs, box sets, movie soundtracks, or anything like that. I have 16 albums to rank, so let me get started. Number 16, I have Black Ice. This one came out on October 20th, 2008, and this is their longest album, I believe. It's 55 minutes, and I know that doesn't sound long, but I think for an AC/DC album, those extra 10 minutes kind of gives it a little bit more of like a bloat. I feel that the front half is a lot better. For example, Rock and Roll Train, Big Jack, Anything Goes. Those are really, really good songs. I like the song War Machine. It's a really cool, like deep cut, like a little heavier. I like that one a lot. But then the album kind of drags a little bit afterwards, up until like the end of the album. So it's good. But I have it, something has to come in last. So that's why I have this at number 16. And number 15, I have Stiff Upper Lip. This one came out in February of the year 2000. This one is good. I think it's more of like a blues rock album. I think it's more like riff heavy. This was produced by George Young, and he's the older brother of Malcolm and Angus. So on this one, I like the single Safe in New York City. I think that one has a nice groove. It's kind of original. It doesn't sound like every other AC/DC song. There's some other good songs. Satellite Blues, that one's kind of catchy, has like a sing-along chorus. The rest of it is okay, but it's an album that I go back to when I want something different. These are like the songs I haven't heard a lot, and then for that reason, I might like revisit this album, but otherwise I have it ranked here. Next I have Blow Up Your Video. This was released in January of 1988, and this is one that I bought this one when I was younger. I think this was the first AC/DC album that I ever bought when I was a teenager that came out new, actually. And I think it's pretty good. It's a Brian Johnson album. It has some really good, it has a really good front half, like Heat Seeper and That's the Way I Want to Rock and Roll. I really like those songs. Those ones are really great. It has like a little bit of filler. There's some songs that are not great, but there's some really cool like deep cuts. So, for example, Two's Up, this is on side 2. That one's really good. Next is Rock or Bust, released on November 28th, 2014. And this one was produced by Brendan O'Brien. He's a guy, he did like a lot of like the grunge bands from the 90s. This one, they had some problems. I know they had Stevie Young on rhythm guitarist, and I don't even think Malcolm was on this because he was having a lot of health concerns and he passed away shortly afterwards. This one, I had it ranked last in my original ranking, but this one has grown on me a little bit. It's a short album, 36 minutes, so that kind of helps. There's like not really a lot of filler on it. The singles I didn't like that much. Rock or Bust, Play Ball. I think those ones I like the least. This is one of those albums where it has like some really good like deep cuts or hidden gems. For example, Dogs of War on side 1, that one's really good. Baptism by Fire, I really like the guitar work in that one. And Emission Control, the last song. That's another really good one. So this one did move up a few spots since my last ranking. Next is Ball Breaker, released on September 26, 1995. And this one is pretty good. Actually, I had this ranked pretty low in my first ranking. It was one of those albums that I just always like overlooked. I didn't really listen to it that much. I didn't go back to it much. Also, it was produced by Rick Rubin. That's kind of interesting that he would do an AC/DC album. I think it's pretty good. It was released in the middle of the 90s, and AC/DC is not a band that's going to be affected by like that like 90s like move towards being like alternative. They're still like doing what they're doing. Like they didn't change at all. This one has a lot of good tracks. Hard as a Rock, Covering in Oils are really great singles. And then on side 2, the other single, Hail Caesar, I really like that one a lot. but it's just a fun album. You know, they have these like fun songs, "Caught with Your Pants Down," "The Furor." Those are pretty good tracks. I think this is a good album to like revisit when you want something different. It's the kind of album maybe you haven't heard it that much, and I think it's definitely worth checking out. And next, I have the new one, "Power Up." This is the one that I have on vinyl here. And when this one came out, I was very excited. My YouTube channel was very new at the time, only a few months old. This was like one of the first like major releases that I reviewed on my channel, and I did like a follow-up review like a year later. So it's an album that I really love, and it actually kind of like dropped a few places. I think it lost some of its excitement, after these 2 years, but still, it's an album that I listen to often. For me, I think it has a better side too, just really solid. Everything from like Demon Fire, Wild Reputation, No Man's Land, like all those songs on side two are really great. On side one, like the first three songs are probably the ones I like the least. Realize, Rejection, Shot in the Dark. But the second half of side one, Through the Mist of Time, Kick You When You're Down, Witch's Spell, those are like really great songs. And this is probably like their last album. I mean, I don't know, but it might be. I don't even think they toured for this yet, as far as I know. But still a great album, one I go back to often. Next is The Razor's Edge, released on September 21st, 1990. And this was this was a comeback album for them. Yeah, I think their albums in the 80s maybe like weren't selling as well. And then they had like this really big hit with Thunderstruck. And this was almost like supposed to be like the next Back in Black. And I think it's pretty good. I like the production on it. It's kind of more of like I don't know. I always felt it had more of kind of like a hair metal kind of feel to it. But the songs, Thunderstruck and Money Talks, these hold up very well. Some songs are kind of cheesy. I think like Mistress for Christmas is what that one's is a little bit cheesy. But overall, I think it's a really solid song. I like Are You Ready as well. I think that one kind of has like a different structure, not the typical ACDC song. And it's just an album I go back to. It's one of their like popular ones. Definitely a good one to check out. Next is a Flick of the Switch, and this is like one of their most like underrated albums because I think it was one of those albums that came like right after like two big ones, but then when it came out, it didn't really sell as well. It also has that cover, which is like a pencil drawing, which I like a lot, but it is kind of like simple. Or the cover art kind of like describes the music, where it's kind of like simple, it's stripped down, raw production. It's just a little different. It's not really as big and bombastic as some of their other albums, but I like it when I just want something different because I think these are songs that I haven't heard a lot. But I really like Flick of the Switch and Nervous Shakedown. Those are the singles, but it has some like really good deep cuts as well. For example, Bedlam in Belgium on side two. That one has some really good guitar riffs. So I think if you're looking for an album that's kind of like a little more like stripped down, a little more raw, that type of production, I think this is a good album to check out. Next, I have Fly in the Wall, released on June 28th, 1985. And this is one of those like divisive albums. This one definitely has some production problems. I know the vocals were kind of mixed a little low, but I think the guitar sound makes up for it. Like this is the only album that has this very distinct guitar tone. I think it's like a chorus effect or something like that, but there's something about the guitar tone that I really like on this album. I've also seen rankings where people say like this is their like number one album, this is their favorite. And I think it's just a very like fun album. It's just like very upbeat and it's just an enjoyable listen. I really like Shake Your Foundations. I really like Sink the Pink. It also has like some like, cool like deep cuts on the back half, like Hell or High Water, Back in Business, Send for the Man. So those ones are really good. This one is a very underrated album. It's a little different and just definitely one to check out. And it's one that I go back to often. Next is Let There Be Rock, released on July 25th, 1977 internationally and March 21st, 1977 in Australia. This is my lowest ranked Bon Scott album, and it's still a really great album. It's good. I go back to it often. I think this one has a kind of like a live feel. It's a hard rock album. The songs are good, just like front to back. But I think this is one that, out of the Bon Scott albums, I think this one that I kind of like go back to like a little like less than some of the other ones. But it does have classics, Dog Eat Dog, Let There Be Rock. Those are great. Overdose is a really good cut, and Whole Lotta Rosie. That's a really great cut that's been covered by different bands such as like Guns N' Roses. Next is High Voltage, the 1976 international version. And this one just has lots of classics. I really like It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll. It's one of those songs that I've always liked, and I've liked it especially ever since Jack Black did that cover in the School of Rock movie. But also has some really good hidden tracks. Rock and Roll Singer, that one has some really great guitar work on it. And it's just a really just like a fun album. It's just, it's in the 70s. They're just like having a lot of fun. It's hard rock, so I think it's really good. Next is For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. This one was released on November 20th, 1981. And this one came out only a year after Back in Black. And also at that time, they released Dirty Deeds internationally. So I think it gets overlooked. I mean, it did very well. It was a #1 album. It just sold, millions of copies. 4 million copies, I believe. It was produced by Mutt Lange, and he produced a few of the albums in the 80s. So it's a really good album. I really love the title track, For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. But this one it's just a solid album, like front to back. I think there's really no filler. I like everything on it. If anything, like the songs towards the end might be the ones that I like the least, but everything from Put the Finger on You, Let's Get It Up, Inject the Venom, Snowball, solid songs. Those ones are really great. And side B, it's still good, but it's just overlooked, I feel. Next is Highway to Hell, released on July 27, 1979. And this one dropped a few spots for me, but it's still a solid album. This was the album that was like #2 on my last ranking, and it was like probably like #1 at one point in my life. But I think it's the one that I've listened to it a lot, and I started to kind of started to like lose a little interest of it. It doesn't really have that magic that it had before. But with that being said, I still have it ranked very high. It's still an awesome album. It's just that first side is just solid. Highway to Hell, Girls Got Rhythm, Walk All Over You, Touch Too Much, and Beating Around the Bush. Just really great guitar work on that one. This is also the last album with Bon Scott before he died of alcohol poisoning. But I think it's just a really great album. I think it dropped a few points for me, maybe because some of the songs on the second side, I don't really maybe go back to as often, like Get It Hot or Love Hungry Man. But otherwise, this one is like really good. Like these are like all solid albums. Next is Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, and this one kind of has like a nostalgic feel for me because it was one of the first albums I listened to when I think it was re-released in like 1980 or 1981, and that's why I was only about like 10 years old. And I went back to this, I listened to it for the first time in a long time, and I really enjoyed it a lot. I think it really holds up well. It's just one of those like fun albums that just, these guys are just having a good time on it. So we have the title track, that one's really great. And I'm like going by the international version because there's two versions. So this one has Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, Love at First Feel, Problem Child, which I think appeared on like 2 albums. And even the second side, Ride On, that's like one of those ACDC ballads that's, they don't really do a lot of ballads, but that's one of them. And it's just ain't no fun waiting around to be a millionaire. That's a really cool deep track. So it's just a very fun album and really enjoyable. At #2, this one is another surprise. Powerage, released on April 28th, 1978 in the UK and May 25th, 1978 in the US. And this is one of those albums that I didn't listen to when I was younger. I probably discovered it maybe around 7 or 8 years ago, and it's one that has grown on me slowly. And I think what I like about it is that it's a solid album. It has songs that were not overplayed on the radio, and it's just really great guitar riffs. It's just one of those albums that this is like the album that like influenced like lots of different bands. I know a lot of like musicians will go back and say they, this is their big album, and it's the one that really didn't get a lot of attention, but just these songs are Rock and Roll Damnation, Down Payment Blues, Sin City, What's Next to the Moon. I mean, when you listen to these, they're like really great songs. And my number one didn't change. It's still Back in Black. It's just a solid album front to back. It's one that I've listened to over and over for like the past like 40 plus years because I started listening to this when I was like 10 years old, and it's one that I've always gone back to when I was in college. They used to play it all the time, and I re-listened to it, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to get bored of it. Maybe I feel it's overplayed, but no, I just enjoy like all 10 songs almost as much as like all of the other songs. I mean, like I enjoy them equally. That's what I'm trying to say. But if I would say the ones that I like the best, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, that would probably be my favorite. Back in Black is my favorite. Hell's Bells, just the whole album basically. But again, this is just a solid album. They just hit a home run with this album when they put it out. It's just, and it was kind of weird. Usually these bands, when their singer dies and they replace them with a new singer, it's either hit or miss. Like the band just completely fails or they completely succeed. And this is one of those cases where they completely succeeded. So that's my AC/DC ranking. Let me know in the comments what you thought. I have many AC/DC related videos, so I put them all in a playlist. So I'm going to link that right there. Check it out. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.